Rorik wakes up in the early morning. He quietly stretches to allow his sister to continue with her sleep. The sun rises, its light peeking through the windows. He looks out to contemplate recent events. Is it really worth going to Coppergate to help a wizard they don't even know? Was it even worth coming to the Misty Vale? His gaze turns down to the river which winds behind the road's end inn. It continues to the east towards what is known as the Haunted Marshes, a foreboding name if there ever was one. Suddenly, an idea comes to mind. What if he could hire a barge or some sort of a boat to take them through the marshes and close to Coppergate? That would surely cut down on the time traveling through such dangerous territory. Rorik rushes downstairs to look for any captains getting ready for the day. Welcome to the castle. Come on in and take a seat. My name is Alex and I am your player, your GM, your host for A Table for One, a solo actual play podcast. This is Secret of the Dragon Emperor, a Dragonbane playthrough, and in the last episode, Rorik, Jaina, and Grub, well, they decided to go to the Road's End Inn. And that was obviously a mistake as they got caught up in some supernatural shenanigans and ended up rescuing everybody in that inn. Needless to say, Rorik ended up confronting the halfling owner of the inn and got a free night and meal. But as we've just seen in the intro scene, Rorik actually has an idea. He's going to see if there is possibly someone with a barge or a boat that can sail them the rest of the way. Because the Rose End Inn is actually along the Coomer River, and it actually goes into the Haunted Marshes for a little bit, which should actually take them close to where I've put Coppergate, to the east. So the very first thing that we're going to do to kind of set this whole adventure up is to see if there is someone with a barge or a boat that can take us along the river through the Haunted Marshes. So we're going to use our Oracle dice and let's see what happens. No. But that's going to be a tough one because it's kind of cut and dry. It was either going to be yes or no, but now we have a but. And really the only thing that I can see here is that instead of a barge, we actually have a carriage that could possibly take us the rest of the way. And as I look on the map here, the path to the Road's End Inn either goes to the east through the Haunted Marshes or it curves along south to this mountain pass, it looks like. So what if there was a small caravan of dwarves that Rorik comes across at the inn, who are a little bit more thankful for him rescuing them? In fact, what if it was Stig Stonehilt and his son that we rescued from the Rose End Inn? What if they are actually traveling by caravan to the south into that mountain pass? Of course, we are not going to go through the mountain pass. We would have to actually get off at some point before we reach the mountains and then travel east through the wilderness then. But it is a possibility, and it could possibly get us there a little bit faster instead of traveling completely through the Haunted Marshes. And so on this day, we set out with Stig Stonehilt with his son in their little small caravan that is probably carrying supplies to whatever's in that mountain pass. And we travel for a day and then we get to the foot of the mountains. Of course, we're not going to depart just yet as it is now getting into evening, but we do need to go ahead and roll for a random event, see if we actually get one. And for this specific roll, I'm going to be using the random encounters at the foot of the mountain since we are very close to the mountains. So let's roll and see what we get. A 12. Oh boy, that's not good. Death from above. A hungry griffin spots the player characters from its nest at the top of a huge tree and attacks with a blood-curdling shriek. Let each player character roll awareness with a bane. If everyone fails, the griffin's attack is surprising and the beast gets initiative card 1 and 2 in the first round. The griffin will flee after losing half of its HP. So we at least stand somewhat of a chance here, but this is pretty bad. So the first thing that we need to do, we need to roll for awareness, and this is done at a bane, which, oh boy, this is not going to be good. But we're gonna see what happens. We're gonna roll for Rorik first. Oh, hey, look at that. He needed to get an 11 or under. He got 4 and 4. So that's already our first success. Although I am going to go ahead and roll for Jaina and Grub just to see if there's anybody else who would notice. So let's roll for Jaina. Jaina has a 6 and a 16, so that is a failure. And for Grub, a 3 and a 7. He actually succeeds. He needed a 10 or under with a 7 and a 3. Awesome. So I imagine that everybody is setting up camp for the night. Stig is talking with his son, and Rorik is kind of there just listening in when they hear when he sees something like flash up in the sky. And he and Grub both take a look, and that's when they see the griffin just swooping in. Rorik yells out, "Griffin, above!" And everybody springs to alert. Now, we actually need to see who else is in this little caravan, because I imagine that it's like a caravan of dwarves here. So we have Stig and his son, and I'm actually going to roll a d6 to see how many dwarves are in this caravan, but I'm also going to consult the fortune chart that's in the solo rules, Alone in Deepfall Breach. On a 1, we're going to have none or possibly 1. On a 2 to 3, we have a few. On 4 and 5, we have several. On a 6, we have numerous. So let's see what happens. A 4, so we have several. So let's say that that's going to be about, we'll go with 4. We'll have 4 extra dwarves here. So for these dwarves, I'm actually going to use the guard stats in the typical NPCs chart, but instead of broadswords, I'm actually going to substitute that out with battle axes. So 2d8 plus a d4's worth of damage, same as Rorik, I believe. So we have our griffin, we have Rorik, Jaina, and our goblin. And let's go ahead and lump the dwarves into one group. How about that? That way I'm not rolling like 6 different initiatives for them, because I don't think I'm going to have enough initiative cards. And since Rorik actually spotted the griffin and alerted everyone, we're just going to do initiative order like we normally do. So Rorik, Jaina, Grub, followed by the dwarves, and then the griffin twice. So Rorik has a 5. Okay. Jaina has a 6. Grub has a 4. The dwarves have a 7. Uh-oh. This isn't looking so good. First one for the griffin is a 9. Okay, so 10, please. 8 or 10 for the griffin. Let's see. 8! Alright, let's go. So, Grub followed by Rorik, then Jaina, the dwarves, and then the griffin twice. So we can certainly deal it, 38 damage in one turn with all 4 of these. But there might be a little bit of a problem. I just realized the dwarves probably don't have any capable means of shooting the griffin while it's flying. Because I'm saying currently right now that the griffin is indeed flying above, getting ready to dive and attack. So he is not on the ground just yet. Luckily for Grub, he does have a short bow, and so he's going to knock an arrow and he is going to fire. Grub has a skill of 10 with bows, so let's see what he gets. A 15, unfortunately, is not going to hit, so he looses the arrow and it just kind of curves a little bit, and just the griffin is able to just dodge out of the way. For Rorik, I think what he's going to do is he's going to step away from the group, and he's going to use his shield and his sword to just kind of bang it and make some noise. Try to draw the griffin's attention so it'll attack him instead of anybody else in the party. Unfortunately, he's not going to be able to parry it with a shield because it's a monster, but he can evade it now that his new armor doesn't give him a bane on evasion. So I actually had this idea that we could use Gust of Wind to try to blow the griffin down. Unfortunately, it's a large creature, and Gust of Wind doesn't work on anything larger than a large creature, which is unfortunate. So instead, she's going to have to use Fireball. She's going to do her hand signs and fling a fireball. The question is, how much power do we want to kick into this? Because we need to do a lot of damage before this thing hits. So I think for the moment, she's going to go ahead and cast it at full power. So 2 WP per power. We can go up to level 3. So we're going to go ahead and use 6 of our WP to cast a level 3 fireball. So 46 worth of damage going to this griffin. The griffin doesn't have armor, so we can do a lot of damage here, potentially. So I got my D20. She needs a 14 or under in elementalism. Let's see if she hits. An 8 is successful, so 46. Let's see how much damage she's doing. Oof. 10, 11 damage right there for the griffin. 27 HP still left. It's the dwarves' turn. And I think what they're gonna do is they're also going to separate from the group. Or maybe, no. I think what they're gonna do is that they're gonna surround Jaina and Grub, the 2 members that are more capable of actually damaging the griffin. And they're going to try to ambush the griffin when it comes down. So while there aren't rules for holding an action, why don't we actually help Jaina and Grub? And this is gonna be like a helping action to help them dodge out of the way just in case the griffin goes after them. And so, time for the griffin. A D6 to see what it does on its monster attack table. A 3. Sweeping claws. The griffin sweeps its clawed foreleg in a wide arc, attacking all player characters within 2 meters. Each victim suffers D8 slashing damage and is knocked down. So we need to see which one the griffin is going for. It's gonna swoop down, but on whom? Now I do have a D4, and what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to roll and see who is going to get hit. And this is pretty much just how it was in initiative order. So we have Grub, then Rorik, then Jaina, and then the dwarves. So let's roll and see what happens. A 4. So the griffin is going to go after the dwarves here. So the griffin is flying around and suddenly it lands right there where the dwarves are. And, the dwarves were protecting Jaina and Grub. They weren't expecting this. And it's gonna go ahead and use its claw attack. The good thing is it only deals a D8 worth of damage, no bonuses or anything like that. And deals 7 points of damage to each of the dwarves. Oof, that's not good. But there is something else. This is a sweeping claw attack. It's gonna go after everybody. So not only do all the dwarves get 7 damage, it's also possibly going to hit Jaina and Grub. And so because the dwarves were actually trying to protect Jaina and Grub, I'm gonna say that they are free from this attack in a way. They probably just push her and Grub out of the way as the griffin just lands and then just does basically like a whirlwind attack with its claw though, and damages them for 7 points. That's 7 damage for each dwarf. So 6 dwarves now have 7 hits or 5 HP left. That's not good. But they are now on the ground, and that's the best part. Unfortunately, the griffin does get to go again. So let's roll and see what it's gonna do. A 6. High drop. The griffin grabs a player character in its claws and takes to the sky. Unless the victim dodges the attack, the griffin grabs them and flies 2d6 plus 6 meters into the air. On its next turn, the griffin drops the victim. Instead of making a new monster attack, who takes damage from the fall. Well, that's rather unfortunate for that dwarf, because they kind of use their action to help. So one of the dwarves is getting picked up and brought with the griffin. Next turn, it's gonna be bad news unless we can do something about that. Which, honestly, I don't really think there is anything they can do about that. For now, we are going to go ahead and roll 2d6 and add 6 to see how many meters into the air this griffin is flying. 9 plus 6 is 15, so 15 meters into the air. That's quite high up. This dwarf is not gonna survive, but we'll worry about that on the next turn. And so the way that I'm interpreting it is that the Griffin gets 2 actions on its initiative. And so the first action is going to be to drop the dwarf, and the second action will go ahead and roll on the monster table to see what it does next. All right, so Rorik, Jaina, Grub, dwarfs, and Griffin. Rorik has a 7. That's not too good. Jaina has an 8. Uh-oh. Grub has a 6. Dwarves have a 1. Well, at least the Griffin doesn't have the 1. And the Griffin a 9 and a 3. So the Griffin is going second and then last in this round. Oh no, we're gonna have a pancake dwarf, I guess. Unfortunately, there's nothing that the dwarves can do, so they are going to just kinda take a stance and they're just gonna wait for the Griffin to come down. So they're shouting up at this Griffin that's 15 meters up above with their axes held high, daring the Griffin to just come in and take one of them so they can deal it justice. Which means it is the Griffin's turn, and we all know what's gonna happen. He lets the dwarf go and it just falls and falls. There's nothing anybody can do. And in fact, I'm gonna ask the Oracle a question. Does it drop the dwarf on the caravan wagon? No. Okay. But there's also a but. So what if the Griffin dropped it into the tree? Because there's a nest there. Regardless, this dwarf is taking at least 5 points of damage for how much it's fallen. Well, instead of rolling like 7 or 8 d6s just to see if there is a chance for him to roll for half of that damage, I'm just basically going to say it's most likely going to be 5 points or more of damage. There's no way this guy is going to survive this fall. And so he hits the tree and he falls right into the Griffin nest because the baby Griffins are definitely going to go after him. And so that's it for that dwarf. Speaking of which, it is now Grub's turn, and so he is going to go ahead and fire his bow yet again to see if he can hit this Griffin. Remember, his bow skill is at 10, so let's see what happens. A 10 is successful, so that means he deals a d10 plus a d4's worth of damage. 3 and 4 is 7, so 7 more points to the Griffin, bringing his total down to 20. It is Rorik's turn, and unfortunately there's nothing that he can do with that Griffin so high up into the air. And so I think what's going to happen instead is that he's going to go over to Jaina and try to protect her. He's going to help her just like the dwarves did. And so if she needs to make an evade action, she'll get a boon on that die. Jaina is going to focus. She's got one chance to end this Griffin, and so she is going to cast Fireball yet again. And so once again, she is going to cast this Fireball spell at a level 3 power. So she needs to roll a 14 or under to hit. A 6, another 46 worth of damage right there. And so let's see how much she's gonna do. 6, 9, 10 more damage to the Griffin. And so this fireball hits the Griffin right there in its face, and you see that its feathers are now singed and burned. It screeches, and it begins to fly off towards this tree where its babies are at, and also a fresh meal. The Griffin is done for now. It's going back home to lick its wounds. Stig rushes up to Rorik and Jaina and Grub too, and he tells them that they need to get into the mountain very quickly. These cliffs are going to be swarming with griffins, and so they should use this night to travel and get to their destination. Of course, this means that Rorik will lose some precious time in getting to Coppergate. Instead of traveling east, they're now headed south into the mountains, and that means, well, they're cut off from their destination. But then Stig tells them that there's possibly another way to get to Coppergate through the mountains, through Grimstone Hold. So Rorik nods his head and agrees that this is the best possible course of action. It's either that or be fed to the griffins. There are a couple things that we need to keep track of on our journeys, and these are actually going to be part of the travel rules in the core rulebook. Journeys proceed in shifts. As mentioned in Chapter 1, there are 4 shifts in a day: morning, day, evening, and night. As a rule, a player character can hike roughly about 15 kilometers per shift on foot or roughly 30 kilometers on horseback. Difficult terrain might slow them down. The player characters can normally walk or ride for a maximum of 2 shifts per day, including a few short breaks. If they make a long stop on the road, the distance they cover is reduced. They cannot march with weapons drawn. But then there's also a forced march. A player character can walk or ride for a 3rd shift during the same day, but becomes exhausted in the process. An already exhausted character cannot travel a 3rd shift, and no one can ever travel more than 3 shifts in a single day. I don't think that we're going to do a forced march here because it's not really warranted. We've already established that we're part of a caravan that's traveling south into this mountain pass, most likely to Grimstone Hold. We've actually been riding in a wagon for most of this day. And I don't think that we've been traveling for 2 shifts either. But I think now we are. We're going to continue to travel down south. So instead of stopping for the afternoon and the evening, we're actually just going to keep on going through for the rest of the day. And eventually we do make it into the mountain pass. And I think this is where we're going to end things off here, because we're going into some new territory here. We're going to establish what exactly is at Grimstone Hold and the rest of the dwarves. Because next time we're going to establish what exactly is Grimstone Hold and just what their whole situation is, if there is one. And we're going to see if there is indeed a way for Rorik and the rest of the group to get to Coppergate from the mountains.
I can't say I'm very excited to travel through a mountain, dearest brother. There are worse things than griffins that lurk in the underground realm. Check back every other Thursday for a new episode of Table for One, a solo role-playing podcast. If you would like to support this podcast, please rate it or give it a thumbs up wherever you happen to be listening from. If you happen to be watching on YouTube, subscribe and be sure to leave a comment. Music was provided by Tabletop Audio and AI voice work by 11 Labs. I'll just go ahead and say that if we meet any monsters down in the mountains, I will push Grub as a sacrifice and make a run for it.